Every city starts with one thing, a construction site. They are consistent in any city, especially in a cyberpunk setting where the expansion is happening at breakneck speeds. They are ugly in real life, but they don't need to be an eyesore in your world. So in today's video, I'm looking at some of my essential details for your construction sites. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another one of these videos. So, full disclaimer, before we get started on this, the majority of this video is brought to you by the power of Captain Jack. That's all, moving on. Actually, before we get started, I would just like to mention that there will be a link down in the description to the world download for this, as well as Captain Jack's Planet Minecraft, so you guys can go and look at all the heavy machinery. I'm not going to go into too much detail about all of these. So the first one we have here is a cement truck, right? One of those mixers, the barrel that turns around. You can see that there's not cobble in there, but actual concrete, and that is the whole thing. It's got a couple of nice details around the outside. These shapes are pretty much the best you can get, which is why I always use Captain Jack as a reference, because he really puts in the time to make sure that the machines and the vehicles all have the correct shapes to them. The next one we have here is a loader. This is used to load up dump trucks and move trash around and clear out areas and load things into skips and all that sort of stuff. Big old tracks on this bad boy, and it looks quite menacing, I have to admit. But it has a cabin here for the driver, and then just a lot of details around the outside, some glow signs and all of that sort of stuff. Then we also have another loader here. This is an arm loader. Right, so this one could potentially reach the dump truck a little bit better, which I'll show you guys in a minute. Another cabin here, and then the tracks to this one were a little bit more tricky, but I think they came out pretty nicely. And then, more glow signs and the whatnots, and I like the little details on them as well. Then the next one we have here is a bulldozer. Every construction site is probably going to need a bulldozer, as you need a flat area to actually work and build things on, right? For the most part, you try and build in flat areas, and if you don't have a flat area, you bulldoze it. So this is a nice big chunky bulldozer, very industrial. These last two are actually meant for mining operations. But, it's Cyberpunk. It's go big or go home in the Cyberpunk world. So we're going with the bigger versions of things. So we have the big boy bulldozer, and then we have the big, very big dump truck. So when everyone says, oh, you got a nice dumpy, they're talking about dump trucks. This thing, it's got a big old backside, right? You can load up a lot of things in this. I don't know why I'm making this joke. It's a big dump truck, massive wheels, and lots of little details around this as well. More glow signs, and then if you come up the front here, these are fire extinguishers, if you would believe that. And then you come up the stairs, and that's the cabin for the driver, and a couple of other machinery bits up at the top here. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is all of the heavy machinery. Now, before we move on to the big boy over there at the end, let's actually look at some of the smaller details. Every construction site needs a work site, right? A job site where all of the offices are, where all of the supplies get dropped off, the entrance to the construction site. First thing we have here is a big old 4x4 Chevy, and this is the foreman's truck. As he came into work with this, his name is Big Jeff. This is his truck. I thought that's a nice detail to have here. You could have some other cars, some other pickups, maybe even a truck that's in here delivering some supplies, right? Then on this side here, we have a big old spotlight. You could remove the spotlight and maybe add like a blast furnace and this on top of this, and it could be a generator for the site if you feel like you want one. But this one is powered by solar power. So it is just running like this. And yeah, spotlights are very important because we're working 24/7 on these sites sometimes, and people need to be able to see at night, and these spotlights are very bright. Then there's also a couple of pallets here. We have a pallet full of cement bags, as I see it, right? So a bunch of cement bags. That is being brought here by this little drone boy. He comes and he actually lands there, and then the crates just get pushed off, or it gets taken off with forklift. I'm not going to show you guys a forklift. We've done one in the port video, so you guys can go and have a look at that. And then there's a couple of other stacks of bricks and things standing around here. Guys, don't be afraid to use mud and end bricks in your Cyberpunk builds. They are fantastic, right? So just some brick piles. And then we have a Jeff bot here. You guys remember Jeff from Atlantia? Man, I miss Jeff. I should build another Jeff. Anyway, we have a little Jeff bot here, and he's just pulling a trolley. Not exactly a wheelbarrow, just kind of like a trolley. Load up with some bricks, and then he takes them away. And it's also kind of set up that it could be used by a human. We do need the human labor at some construction sites as well. So yeah, it could be used for that. Then moving on over here, we have some yellow cones. I think that this is probably the best way to do a yellow cone. I don't really think there's a better way of doing it than red sandstone walls. And then we have some rebar, exposed rebar, reinforced concrete. You put the rebar either in the foundation or in the pillars or in any other structure that you're trying to build. It's a very interesting building technique. So basically what they'll do is they'll put the bars and then they'll board up a shape, right, that they want. And then they'll just pour concrete into it and wait for that to set and then remove the outer shell. And then you'll have pillars, you can make statues, you can do all kinds of things with reinforced concrete like this. This is something that I would say very much sells the fact that this is a construction site. And you can even have it where it's coming out of the sides of buildings like this, or however you want to do it. The next thing we're going to look at here is the skip. Every construction site needs to be kept well maintained for health and safety purposes so that people don't trip over rubble and whatnot. That's where the loader comes in, right? The loader will scoop up all of the rubble and drop it into the skip, and then this thing can just come and get picked up by a skip truck and be taken away, and everything is nice and tidy. Now, before we go into the corner over there and look at the big things at the back, let's just have a quick little look at something that we are all familiar with. We all went to a school where there were temporary classrooms that never got taken down, and that's pretty much what these are. It's exactly the same construction, these temporary job site offices, and you could have them either elevated off of the ground or flat on the ground like these ones. And it's places for the foreman's office, for the supervisor, for some of the accounts people or the logistics people to just have little offices, right? There's not too much to these interiors currently. Just a little desk and some shelves and whatnot. These things are obviously just for temporary use, right? Until the construction is complete, and then they just break these things down. Then moving on to the back here, we have a container. We've done a lot of containers, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about the container itself, but usually how job sites and construction sites work is that a lot of the supplies will be brought in via a container, but then what they'll do is they'll actually empty out the container and put the supply somewhere and convert it into a workshop for the workers to come and tinker and do some specific things, maybe fix power tools and stuff like that that have broken. It's a great place to store also the more important tools and stuff, and not like general supplies that you want to keep out of the weather. Right? These things sometimes also get turned into like little mess holes, either these ones or the containers themselves for people to sit and eat in. Usually not so much in big city constructions, maybe in more secluded areas, but it's worth noting as well that you could potentially put a tiny little cafeteria in there if you want to sell this. Then we're moving on to this here, right? Now, some of you might recognize what this is from our apartments video. This is actually the capsule apartment. One of the main facets of architecture in a cyberpunk setting. Now, most of the stuff that I've shown you guys up until now have been generic construction things that we see in modern construction sites as it is. But metabolism, not the biological process, but the actual architecture style, is something that's very prevalent in cyberpunk settings for its reusability, its easy assembly. It's just cheap to make, cheap to put together, cheap to break, cheap to fix, all of that sort of stuff, right? So, capitalism, perfect. A very notable example of this is the Nagagin Tower in Tokyo that got demolished last year. It's something that can definitely sell the fact that this is more of a cyberpunk construction site. It's not just your average construction site. We're actually putting together a capsule tower. They usually board it up in the front here, and then you'd slap it onto a building where there's already a door and a hallway and everything here, and you would just take the cardboard or whatever off of the front of this thing, and then you have an apartment ready to go. I've made it look so that they are actually like linking up to each other, so it's kind of like a Lego building, right? You can just stack this together however you want. And there's two ways that these could be put onto a building, either via the crane that we're going to look at in a bit, or via Bezos's big boy brother here, who I have not named. Bezos 2.0, I guess. He's only one block wider than before, just so that I can get the proportions correct, but I've also just changed up the block palette for it a little bit, so it's more of the construction-y sort of stuff, right? And here we have some chains attached to some magnets that can just attach to one of these and then lift it up and slap it onto the side of a building if it has the room. Otherwise, you're probably going to use the crane. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is most of what I consider to be essentials in the job site. Then the last thing that we need to look at here is the crane itself. Now, this is a crane like most of you have already seen. There's not much different about it, but there's a few things that I'd like to mention. One is the counterweight at the back. The counterweight is usually made out of like concrete or some heavy type of stone, but I like the look of copper in this. It's something that we've done before. Back when we did the port video and we did the dredger crane, we also had a counterweight out of copper there. And copper is a pretty nice material to use for counterweights because it is a very heavy metal and it actually makes for a pretty decent, dense counterweight. I like the idea of that. Then the other thing that is notable about cranes is that they generally have some billboards up at the back here. It's capitalism, the whole thing. Mega corporations, sell. You know the drill. So in this case, we have some billboards for Apex Construction, actually the company that's going to be building all of these things. That is pretty much the most important details to the crane. If we look here, we have the tracks for the actual hook, and we also have some of the warning lights for helicopters and such. And then there is the cab for the driver, and there's also a little bit of an observation deck down here for people to look and see what's going on while they're working on the crane. But ladies and gentlemen, that is it for today's video. I hope that you found this interesting. I know that I don't go into too much detail on how to actually build these things. I'm trying more to teach you guys how to use ideas and come up with ideas and how to build rather than showing you how to build, right? Teach a man to fish. I hope that you enjoyed it. Leave me a like if you did. If you found any of this useful, subscribe if you haven't already. And if you want to take this further, how about you check out this industrial video on the screen right now, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a fantastic day, and see ya.